show you how to replace a clutch in your car or your truck. Now the reason why I'm replacing the clutch is, well, I had to lower my transmission because the throwout bearing, also known as the release bearing, is shot. Look at how much play there is in there. It's just in pieces. So that's junk and needs to get replaced. Now while I'm in there, I might as well replace these parts as well. So in this video, we're going to be replacing the clutch, we're going to be replacing the pressure plate, I'm going to be replacing my flywheel. You don't necessarily have to replace yours, you can get it resurfaced. It's like resurfacing a brake rotor when you replace the brake pads. But in this case, I have a nice brand new aluminum flywheel. It's lightweight. I'll show you the difference between this one and the stock one. And since I use my car on the track, a nice aluminum one, less rotational mass, way better. I'll also be replacing the throwout bearing and the pilot bearing, as well as the rear main seal. Now, if your car has an oil leak where the engine and transmission meet, odds are your rear main seal is dead. And in order to get to that, you need to drop the entire transmission. So, a few bucks for the seal, you might as well do it as preventative maintenance. And finally, put in a new clutch fork, and I'm going to put a new clutch cable in. And the best part is, all this stuff is going to be done at home using common tools. Here's everything you need. It's that simple. So after watching this video, whether you need to replace the rear main seal in your car or truck, or you need to put a new clutch in, maybe you want to upgrade your flywheel, whatever it is, I'm going to be covering everything that you need to know so you can do this at home yourself. Now I do want to thank Advanced Auto Parts for sending me out all these new parts. That way I can show you guys how to do this. And with that said, I'll link all the parts and tools in the description so you can easily find them. And we're ready to get started. So the first thing that you need to do is to lower your transmission and remove it from the vehicle. Now I have an entire video on how to do this that goes in depth, and I'll link that in the description so you can check that one out. But just as an overview, the first thing we need to do is to go into the car and remove the shifter. Then go under the car and unbolt the exhaust. Then we'll drain the transmission fluid, we'll remove the drive shaft, and remove the starter. And finally, unbolt the transmission, and the transmission will slide out and down so we can remove it from under the car. Alright, and with that transmission removed, now we can go under the vehicle and remove the clutch. Now it's important that you wear eye protection and a dust mask because that clutch dust is bad to breathe in. So get that on and head under the car. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this pressure plate, which sandwiches the clutch against the flywheel and holds it in. The pressure plate is held in by 6 bolts around the perimeter and it's screwed into the flywheel. And before we remove the bolts, I like to spray down the clutch with water to get the dust wet, which makes it less likely to get airborne and you won't breathe it in. With that sprayed down, now let's remove the 6 bolts holding the pressure plate on the flywheel. And as you can see, when I go to loosen this, the flywheel just spins because nothing is holding it. So a simple trick is to grab a wood block and wedge it between the flywheel and the body of the car, like so. That prevents the flywheel from spinning, so you can easily remove the bolts holding the pressure plate in. I recommend not using air tools when removing these bolts because it'll just blow the clutch dust around and you're going to breathe that in. Instead, use an impact gun, or as you can see, hand tools work perfectly fine. Now let's remove this piece of wood and unscrew the last bolt. And since it is the last bolt, hold that pressure plate with your other hand so it won't just fall when you unscrew the bolt all the way. Now grab the clutch and pressure plate from the middle and pull it off the flywheel. Just be careful because it's a lot heavier than you would think. Alright, and it is that simple to remove a clutch and pressure plate. And now that it's removed, we can move on to our next step. I am going to come back and show you the differences between the stock clutch and the aftermarket clutch and talk a little bit about that. But the next thing we need to do is remove the stock pilot bearing. This is what the transmission input shaft goes into and spins. It holds it in place on the crankshaft. So it's important that we replace this as preventative maintenance. And to do that, there are 2 different methods. The first method is to use a pilot bearing removal tool like this. Now most of us won't have this, so you can rent this for free at your local Advanced Auto Parts. But let's just say you can't get this tool for whatever reason. The second method is to use bread and water or grease. Grease is thicker so it works a little better. So let me show you both methods on removing the pilot bearing. So the pilot bearing is located right here in the middle of the flywheel. It's pressed in, so we're going to have to pull it out. And that's where our pilot bearing tool is going to come in handy. It has 2 hooks on the end. It goes into the pilot bearing. It opens up like that, and it grabs onto the pilot bearing so we can pull it out. And I like doing this before we replace the flywheel because if the tool slips or something happens and we gouge the flywheel, well, it has to get resurfaced or we have to replace it, so that's okay. But if our good flywheel was on here or a resurfaced one was on here and we gouge it, well, now we have a problem. So to use the tool, insert it into the pilot bearing and tighten down the threaded rod by hand until you can't tighten it down anymore. Make sure you get this as tight as possible because you want this to spread the hooks out and grab onto that bearing. Next, get a wrench and tighten down the nut, which is going to cause the tool to pull on the bearing. And if you watch the bearing, you can see it get pulled outwards as I turn the wrench. And there we go. You can see how the tool holds the pilot bearing in and grabs onto it so we can pull it out. And one last quick tip, with this puller, you want to make sure that you're straight on. You don't want to pull at an angle, you don't want to pull it when it's cocked to the side a little bit. It has to be straight on top of that bearing and pulling straight out, otherwise it won't work right. So now you've seen the puller method, nice and simple. Let me show you the other method just in case you can't get yourself one of these pullers. And to show you the other method, I'm going to install a new pilot bearing. I bought two just so I can show you this method. So I'm going to quickly clean out the bore so we have a clean surface to install the new bearing into. And I'll cover the installation in detail in a second, but for now, just carefully tap the bearing in. Now for the second method, you want to get grease and pump it into the bearing hole. And you want to keep pumping grease into the middle of the pilot bearing until the whole thing is filled with grease. And once the grease starts coming out, then we could get some bread, and you're just going to shove the bread in there. And what that does is that's going to just help seal that grease in. Now you can grab an extension or a metal dowel, anything that you have that's going to fit in the pilot bearing nice and tight. It shouldn't be so tight that it's stuck on the pilot bearing.